What is poppin', YouTube? Back again with another video. Today we are doing my 5 must-have wide receivers in 2023 fantasy football. Let's go. So without further ado, my first must-have wide receiver is going to be Cooper Kupp. Now I know what you're saying. Caleb, Cooper Kupp, first round wide receiver in redraft this season. I know I need to be drafting Cooper Kupp, but he's in the first round. So why is he a must-have for you? Now, I know we've been talking about my Garrett Wilson love. We've been talking, people have been debating, of course, Justin Jefferson versus Jamar Chase. But Cooper Kupp has kind of fallen under the radar as that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 range, where people are saying Cooper Kupp's getting a little bit old. What is happening with Matthew Stafford's arm? What is happening with the Rams offense? But if we look at what happened with him last season, yes, he only played 9 games. Yes, it wasn't the most ideal situation for our man Cooper Kupp. But in those 9 games, he still put up 22.4 fantasy points per game, which put him as the wide receiver 1 on a fantasy points per game basis. He was on track to do the same exact things that he was doing the year before. Now, the year before put up 25.9 fantasy points per game. So even still, putting up more than 22 fantasy points per game in 2 straight seasons is a super impressive thing. He actually had 98 targets in those 9 games. So if we times that, let's assume he was going to play 17 games, even if we times that by almost 2, he was still on track to get around that 190 targets. So Cooper Kupp was about to have the same exact season that he had the year before. Now I know what you're saying. Caleb, Cooper Kupp's getting older. How can we continue to expect this type of production year in and year out? My thing with Cooper Kupp is he doesn't win with his elite level athleticism. He wins with his routes, with his intelligence at the line of scrimmage. And if we know anything about what's going to happen to the Rams this year, talk about that offense, there's literally 2 players you can mention, Cam Akers and Cooper Kupp. Those are the only 2 offensive weapons. Now, yes, there are these flyers like the Puka Nakuras. Tyler Higbee is going to be someone that is going to be reckoned with because of the lack of weapons in this offense. But as we know, even if you do double Cooper Kupp, it's almost impossible. Man finds a way to get open. So Cooper Kupp is my number 1 must-have wide receiver everywhere. Like we said, I'm still taking Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase over Cooper Kupp because I think if they had an amazing breakout year, it could be way higher than Cooper Kupp, but Cooper Kupp has been the master of consistency as the wide receiver 1 in points per game the last 2 years. I will be taking a shot with Cooper Kupp as my wide receiver 3. My second must-have wide receiver everywhere. We're talking underdog leagues. We're talking redraft leagues where I'm setting lineup. It's Jackson Smith-Njigba. Now, I know what you're saying. Caleb, you're a homer. You're an Ohio State fan. Why are you choosing Jackson Smith-Njigba as your second must-have wide receiver? Jackson Smith-Njigba, take out the injury that he had at Ohio State this last season. And when we were talking about him compared to Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, we were talking about Jackson Smith-Njigba as the next Jamar Chase, as the man that was dominating the wide receiver touches at Ohio State. Now, of course, last season, only plays in 3 games, gets injured, plays with a bad hamstring for a little bit, so we really can't look at his last year numbers. But fast forward to now, he's drafted to the Seattle Seahawks with the 20th pick. A lot of people are saying Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's a wide receiver 3, he's going to be behind Tyler Lockett, behind DK Metcalf. All reports from camp, Geno Smith, high praise. Pete Carroll, high praise. And what a lot of people are saying, a lot of content creators, a lot of people on Twitter are saying, we've got to pump the brakes on JSN just based on the fact that Seattle loves to run those 2 tight end sets. We haven't seen them run the 3 wide receiver set personnel very often. Well, you don't just draft a wide receiver at pick 20 and expect him to be on the bench. No, you're putting him in the game, especially when he's already getting this type of high praise. I know a lot of people are a lot higher on Jordan Addison this year in redraft, even Quentin Johnston, but I still think Jackson Smith-Njigba has the potential to get that 100 to 110 targets in the Seattle Seahawks offense this season. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he surpasses Tyler Lockett, and you could even make the case that he might even out-target DK Metcalf just because of where he's going to be operating on the field. Now, currently in these underdog drafts, he's going off around pick 61, which put him as wide receiver 32 in underdog league, which is the perfect shot for me to be taking the upside of Jackson Smith-Njigba. When we talk, we can even look back on Jamar Chase's rookie year, where he was going in the 3rd round of your redraft leagues. All of a sudden, all of those worries about drops happen, and all of a sudden, we see Jamar Chase really outperform ADP his rookie season. I think the same thing without those concerns could happen for JSN, especially when he's going off the board in the wide receiver 30s. He is in a middling wide receiver 2. He's a middling wide receiver 3. I'm willing to take a shot, especially with the high upside and the unknown in the Seattle Seahawks offense. So he is my second player that I'm grabbing everywhere with taking those high upside shots as my wide receiver 3, feeling good, even if he is my wide receiver 2, if I went super heavy RB, if I took a quarterback and a tight end, knowing that he probably is going to demand the type of target share that he had at Ohio State. I'm not worried about Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf not letting him get the targets that he's probably going to earn. My third must-have wide receiver is going to be Diontae Johnson. If you've been watching my Dynasty content earlier this offseason, you know my love for Diontae Johnson. You know how I'm saying that he was a buy. But especially in redraft this season, he is a buy. Now, a lot of people are starting to draft George Pickens over Diontae Johnson because they feel like he's the alpha. They remember the big catch, the big-bodied wide receiver. And yes, while I agree that George Pickens is more of an alpha-type wide receiver, Diontae Johnson has done absolutely nothing but demand targets. If we look at his last 3 seasons, last season, 147 targets. The year before that, 169 targets. And the year before that, 144 targets. Last season was not great on a points-per-game basis. 10.6 fantasy points per game, put him as the wide receiver 39. And so that wasn't great. But if we look at the year before that, 17.2 fantasy points per game when he had 169 targets, put him as the wide receiver 8 on a points per game basis. And then the year before that, 14.8 fantasy points per game, put him as the wide receiver 22. So we can see that he has demanded very consistently high level target share. If we look even to at last season in his opportunities, I know he didn't have a down year, but he was the wide receiver 14 in air yard percentage and wide receiver 6 on the amount of targets that he commanded. We love to see that for Diontae Johnson. And the thing that we need to even remember, I know they brought in Allen Robinson, but Kenny Pickett is going to improve in year 2. Even if Kenny Pickett, it's just minimal improvements. Diontae Johnson is still going to be a target hog. And if we look at the regression that he's going to have, especially considering the fact that he had 0 touchdowns this last season, even if he can get into that 5 to 6 range, Diontae Johnson is going to be an elite level fantasy producer. And you don't even have to draft him as one. Currently right now on underdog drafts, he's going off as wide receiver 34, around pick 64. So again, we are taking Diontae Johnson as a wide receiver 3 candidate. But we can see clearly that he has wide receiver 1 potential in his range of outcomes, and even so, high-end wide receiver 2 production that you're able to get as a wide receiver 3. So that is another reason I'm drafting Diontae Johnson everywhere. Now, with this video, you can see I like a lot of these later round wide receivers. That doesn't mean that you don't take your elite level top guys in hopes to get these guys. But these guys are going to be able to build out your roster, especially when you're playing in underdog drafts where it's a 3 wide receiver format, or even when you're playing in redraft leagues where you have 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. You're going to want to get depth at the wide receiver position because that is the best position to plug in with the highest upside in those formats. My 4th must-have wide receiver everywhere is Elijah Moore. Now, Elijah Moore transitions to the Cleveland Browns. We have Elijah Moore pairing up with Deshaun Watson. Now, a lot of people are off Elijah Moore after last year getting in the doghouse with the Jets with only 5.5 fantasy points per game. But let me remind you what he did the year previous to that. 12.6 fantasy points per game, put him as the wide receiver 28, 5 receiving touchdowns, 77 targets, and 43 receptions with 12.5 yards per reception. Even in last year in the down year where he only had 5.5 points per game, he did still average 12.1 yards per reception. The thing that we can even look at is we can say, wow, what was the big difference between 2021 and 2022? Honestly, he only had 11 less targets last season, even with everything that happened. The issue was they weren't quality targets. If Elijah Moore can be the wide receiver 2 on the Cleveland Browns for this season, we're going to be looking at a guy in an offense with the best quarterback that he's had up in his career, with the most opportunity. As much as we love Amari Cooper, we saw exactly what Amari Cooper could do this last season. The Cleveland Browns were clearly missing that second wide receiver option. David Njoku, solid receiving option. Who's going to take that place? Now, I know they did draft Cedric Tillman. A lot of people are still on David Bell, and they still have Donovan Peoples-Jones. But Elijah Moore, to me, is the most explosive, and especially when we're going to be working out of the slot. Nick Chubb in the backfield, no more Kareem Hunt. So we're looking at the running backs taking a little bit less receptions this year, just depending on what happens. Maybe they do resign Kareem Hunt. Can't predict in the future, but I do like me Elijah Moore this season, and he is my 4th wide receiver that I must have in all my fantasy football leagues, and my 5th and final wide receiver that I must have. This is a little bit later of a shot, a little bit more upside with less proven results, is going to be Skyy Moore. Skyy Moore is looking like he's going to be the wide receiver 2 on the Kansas City Chiefs. And last year, we do know that he did get off to a slow start. He did struggle to get the field. Now, this is something that we even saw out of all wide receivers in the Andy Reid offense. It takes a little bit of time to learn. We can even say, look back to Tyreek Hill, and he did not get on the field that much his rookie season. But if we look at when he did get on the field, it wasn't great. 2.7 fantasy points per game, wide receiver 122 in the 16 games that he played with only a 33 target. Now, he did catch that touchdown in the Super Bowl, which made a lot of us in Dynasty and or who could see the potential in Skyy Moore really excited. We come into this season and he's already getting praise from camp, saying that he's really improved. His lateral quickness has gone up, and Andy Reid has said that he even is getting more time on the field and has a better connection with Patrick Mahomes. Now, Kadarius Toney is still there. Of course, Travis Kelce is still there. And there's these looming rumors of DeAndre Hopkins. We don't know where DeAndre Hopkins is going to land. And if he does land in Kansas City, that could tank Skyy Moore's value just a little bit. But right now, Skyy Moore, you're taking a very late shot on Skyy Moore. and you could definitely see it paying off. Skyy Moore is currently going off in underdog drafts as the wide receiver 54, going off around pick 115. Now, he did get a little bit of a bump, just a tad bit of a bump. He's gone up about 5 spots on underdog, but still not enough for me to say that Skyy Moore isn't a must-have. I mean, we're looking at late guys, late round chops. Now, maybe you prefer Adam Thielen in that range over Skyy Moore, but when I'm in that late in underdog drafts and we're playing in this 3 wide receiver format, best ball format, especially high upside. I mean, what is Adam Thielen's upside? Maybe he's a little bit safer an option, especially if you lack wide receiver depth. But Skyy Moore to me has unlimited potential because we've seen what happens when a wide receiver that has the traits that Skyy Moore does, relative, comparative to Tyreek Hill. Now, he's not an absolute burner, but he is fast. And when he gets the ball in his hands, we still haven't seen that electric explosion. I'm all in on Skyy Moore in 2023, and I'm going to be taking a late shot. And worst comes to worst, especially in your redraft leagues, late round shot on Skyy Moore doesn't work out. Definitely going to put him to waivers if that is something that you're interested in. Now, I appreciate everyone for tuning in here today. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Best free way to support the channel, and I'll be back again with another video tomorrow. Catch you guys on the flip side. Peace.